Welcome to this special dialogue on BRICSonomics, encapsulating economic decisions by the five countries by Center for Public Policy Research, CPPR, a think tank dedicated to in-depth research on various policy matters. I'm Neelima, Research Associate at CPPR. Today we have a distinguished guest, Dr. N R Bhanumurthy, a renowned economist, joining us for an insightful conversation to analyze the recently concluded BRICS Summit 2023 from an economic perspective. Dr. N R Bhanumurthy is the Vice Chancellor of BR Ambedkar School of Economics University, Bengaluru. Previously, he has been associated with various institutions like National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, Institute of Economic Growth, UNESCAP, Thailand, etc. Welcome, sir, to the CPPR Dialogue. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here for the discussion.
Thank you, Neelima. Thank you.
So all the eyes have been on the Johannesburg this week as the five emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa met during the 15th BRICS Summit this year. So when we go back to the foundation of the BRICS, BRICS had its beginning in the 2001 when it was called BRIC, a term coined by Jim O'Neill, an economist at the Goldman Sachs. This acronym stood for Brazil, Russia, China, India, etc. At that time, Russia officially launched the BRIC grouping in 2006, and later in 2011, South Africa joined the group. Back in 2003, Goldman Sachs predicted that within the next 50 years, these countries could become a stronger economic force in the world than even the G6 countries combined. Presently, BRICS collectively represent a quarter of the global GDP and encompass 42% of the world's population. What began as an informal association has gradually transformed into a more structured platform due to its high-level political gatherings and established economic institutions. So this summit is also holding a lot of significance. This is the first time the leaders of the five economies are meeting in person since 2019 and after the COVID pandemic. So even in 2022, when the COVID has receded, the remnants of the pandemic remained in China and the summit was hosted via video conferencing. So this is also the first in-person meeting since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And even that has cast a long shadow, not only over the global stability, but on food, fertilizer, fuel, energy, security, etc. So a lot of themes has been on the discussion over the past few weeks regarding the expansion of BRICS, the path towards de-dollarization, and also the investment and growth projection of the global South economies. So as the summit just concluded in Johannesburg, I would like to ask you what are the key takeaways that we could take from this year's summit that could be looked upon for the coming years from an economics point of view?
Yeah, first of all, as you rightly pointed out, the BRICS grouping happened during the high growth period, okay, between 2003 and 2008. It is the what to say, the peak of globalization, which led these five countries to really take advantage of the globalization process, and all the three countries were growing at the historically high growth rates with respect to their own past growth rates. And I think that point of time there was so much of apprehension, given that all five countries from different regions, different languages, different endowments, whether these BRICS can really hold on for a long time. I think 16 or 17 years down the line, we know that the BRICS actually strengthened every year, and we have already seen the outcome of the BRICS grouping in the form of NDB happening, and in fact, even the NDB started expanding in a big way in the recent period. So in the context of that, and as you rightly pointed out again, I think after COVID-19 as well as Ukraine-Russia war, there was so much of expectations from the meeting that just concluded, and one of the long pending aspect of the BRICS was the expansion of the BRICS itself. We just saw the joint statement where finally the BRICS grouping has accepted 6 or 7 countries as part of as a new full member of the BRICS grouping from 1st of January 2024. So if you look at the countries that are brought in, I think it again gives so much of diversity to the grouping, and in fact, it will work as a very good pressure group. In fact, if you look at the joint statement, they clearly mention that the new BRICS grouping should work as a pressure group in the G20, which is a slightly a bigger grouping compared to BRICS. And I think the summit that's happening in September in Delhi will see the some of the items that came in the BRICS joint statement be part of the table. So I would say that the emerging market economies groups are only expanding in a way. And this is a very welcoming, and I'm sure it will work as a very strong pressure group, not only in the G20, but also in, reforming the United Nations, which has been pending for more than 75 years. And I think this is high time that the BRICS grouping, the new BRICS grouping, can bring in more pressure on the international financial institutions.
So you have actually made a comment supporting the expansion of the BRICS group, right? So even within BRICS, the existing members are having a lot of differences as in such. So how do you think that when new members get added to it, like who has other divergent views, how do you think that that will help in the smooth functioning of the organization?
It is because of the divergence we need to have this kind of groupings. If you have a same thinking and same ideology, I don't think you need to work together, because you have same ideology. Just because there are diverse, I think it makes all the more sense to have much more coordination, cooperation between these countries. And the kind of countries that are added, if you look at Saudi Arabia, UAE, if you look at the main BRICS, it all has different endowments. For example, Brazil had agriculture, advantage on the agriculture. South Africa had an advantage on minerals. Russia had advantage on gas and oil, and India had advantage in service sector. China has advantage on manufacturing. Now, if you look at simple GDP or output, you talk about agriculture, industry, and services. Now, all these five countries have different comparative advantage, and also makes cooperation much more easier, because between Russia and India is very natural advantage in terms of cooperation, like in terms of gas or in terms of petrol, or from India it is the service sector. So I think that diversity still seems to be remained in the expanded BRICS group, and I think within this BRICS, my feeling is the COVID-19, which led to destruction of the global value chains, global supply chains. I think this new BRICS grouping will only going to work opposite of that. I think they are going to expand the global supply chain among themselves, because as I said, they have diverse advantages. And I think by increasing the trade or cooperation between these diversified groups will only help in improving the common good among the BRICS nations. So I think it is going to work much more positively than why we think it has a limitation in a way.
Thank you so much, sir. So when we go into the economical aspects, like de-dollarization has been a main discussion within the BRICS at the moment. So lately, it was in the news that the new development bank established by BRICS nation is preparing to issue its first Indian rupee bond by October 2023. The new development bank also issued its first rand bond in South Africa last week, and we could consider a local currency issuance in the members like Brazil, Russia, and UAE as well. So these all serve as a path towards aiming to reduce the dependence on the dollar. So as an economist, how do you perceive the challenges BRICS could encounter on its path towards de-dollarization? Do you envision a success for this anytime sooner?
I've been thinking on this subject for some time now. See, de-dollarization is going to be a very, very long-term objective. I mean, long-term process in a way. I will tell you one thing. Now we have shifted from gold to dollar, right? I think In 1970s, we had a gold standard, and I think post oil crisis in 1970s, we have shifted from gold to dollar. I think that's how we got into dollarization. Now, dollarization, I think it has to be what you say, international kind of a currency. We had gold was international currency, and now next it was dollar. Now, if you want to de-dollarize, what is important is there is a need for so many institutions to work on it. One simple example I can give, I mean, I think you can understand what I'm trying to say. Ultimately, for example, if it is a rupee ruble exchange rate, you don't have trading in that rupee ruble exchange rate in the forex market, either in India or in Russia. So what you do is there are cross currencies, rupee US dollar divided by ruble US dollar. Then only you will get rupee as ruble exchange rate. So ultimately or intrinsically, you still have to have that dollar market to really convert whatever you are saying, or the pricing, for example. How many rupees per ruble? You don't know that. We need to get it determined by the market forces, right? So you intrinsically you still have to have that dollar as part of the whole game until unless you start having trading in the rupee and ruble market. Okay, so that is one thing. So what BRICS is trying to think is more of a sub-dollarization. It is not a dollarization, or a kind of a semi-dollarization or sub-dollarization kind of a thing that they're talking about. And I would say that, still, ultimately it has to be determined by the dollar exchange market. But I think the point that you said about NDB floating RAND bonds or rupee bonds of 2.5 billion in October. So these are all welcoming. Basically, that helps partially support our pressure on the foreign exchange. But ultimately, as I told you, even if you $2.5 billion, if you're saying intrinsically you are hedging on the rupee dollar forex market, which is traded. The rest of them are actually not traded. But you have to look at what happened, the rupee trade between India and Iran, for that matter, and again rupee trade between India and Russia in the post-Ukraine-Russia war. My feeling is that it might help in the very short term, but I think in the long run, until unless we don't develop the institutions or forex market for those currencies, we will not be able to completely move away from a dollar market. So I think one needs to be settlement, to some extent, partially you will settle. Again, then it's a barter system, you are settling down, right? But we cannot go back to the barter system until unless you don't get the value of your currency vis-a-vis other currencies. It's going to be very difficult for a settlement. But one small thing that can happen, to the extent of the volume that trade that's happening between the two countries, there could be some reduction of the transaction cost. Like, for example, if you are doing trade with China, you buy the dollar and then sell it to Chinese companies. That transaction cost is something you might reduce partially, but ultimately the net exports, whoever is holding the net exports, they may have to go to the forex market and convert to the US dollar. So I think that it might help partially the transaction cost, but if you want to really expand the trade, I'm not really sure that we are going to replace the dollar very soon.
Thank you, sir. That was an insightful comment on how difficult it is to go towards the path of de-dollarization. And if you think about BRICS, the new development bank cannot be kept aside. So the new development bank, which was established in 2015, was to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects in the BRICS countries and other emerging market economies and developing countries, etc. So also a lot of new members were added to the new development bank. like Bangladesh, UAE, Uruguay, Egypt has been added over the past few years. So as NDB inches closer to its 10th years, like 10th year anniversary in the year 2025, can you encapsulate the functions of NDB in terms of what makes it really different from the renowned monetary institutions like IMF and the World Bank?
So NTB, again, we should not really think that it's going to be quite different from any bank, to that matter, whether it's IMF or World Bank, because World Bank again has a different, what do you say, objective, right? And they look at poverty issues and all those things. But IMF, again, it has only, it has a slightly broader objective compared to NDB. NDB has you can compare NDB with one larger part of Asian Development Bank, where they do fund for large infrastructure projects, and especially in Asia region. So to that extent, NDB may be comparable with some aspects of Asian Development Bank. Having said that, I think 10 years seems to be a little small to really analyze the outcomes of the National Development Bank, NDB, New Development Bank. So we need to wait for some more time. And I think there are few projects they have really sanctioned, and we don't know what are the outcomes of those projects. But I think the way that the Asian Development Bank faces those constraints, NDB also must be facing. I don't know really now. We need to get into a little more detail. See, the literature on NDB is still limited. So except whatever is put up on the website, in fact, Asian Development Bank, I know very well that there are any projects, for example, if you want to do some projects in Northeast region, one of the BRICS countries always have objections to those kind of projects. Similarly, if they do some projects in South Asia other than India, again, one of the BRICS bank has their own issues. So I guess those issues would not be very different from what Asian Development Bank is facing. But at the same time, I think what NDB seems to be doing is that the response time for some of the countries that are in need of quick resources may be less compared to what IMF or what Asian Development Bank takes. So particularly if you take the case of Sri Lanka or Pakistan recently, where they went to an International Monetary Fund, the negotiations took so much time. By then there was so much crisis in the respective countries, both in Pakistan and Sri Lanka. So these are the places where NDB could have played a little larger role. But I think that politics part of that, providing resources to member countries may still be new for NDB. So it may take some more time for evolving itself as a lender of first resort. That, especially for the member countries, I think that will take some time in my view.
So even during the COVID pandemic, NDB has done a lot of lending works and helping, etc., right?
Yes.
So it was really great. It was a great insightful comment from your side on the part of NDB. So thank you, sir, so much for this engaging session. As we have come to the end of the session, we can rightly conclude from this discussion that the BRICS expansion, as you have mentioned, the BRICS expansion has a lot of opportunities in itself, like making BRICS into a better and more better institution, and also the path towards de-dollarization is not that smoother, encountering a lot of challenges in replacing the dollar in the coming years. And also if you look into the functions of the NDB also, the response time for the countries in need of quick resources has been less compared to the other institutions, etc. So we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. N R Bhanumurthy for this, for sharing his profound insights on the BRICS. Thank you, sir, once again, and thank you all for listening. The CPPR team will be back with another interesting topic. Until then, goodbye.